Okay. Webinar is now broadcasted to all attendees. The attendees list is filling up.
And it's recording as well. Ooh,
yeah.
Yay.
it's exciting.
I'm just going to say good afternoon, everyone. I think you're all coming into this webinar. Just to get us started, some practical stuff. We're using a webinar functionality now because our calls have got so big, it's going to be easier to manage. So that means you're probably going to have to ask to speak, or the easier way to do it will be to note a question in chat, and then we'll call you to get going. The other practical point is, as always, we're recording this so we can turn it into a podcast. So please don't say anything you wouldn't wish to be podcasted. Podcast is shorter, so not everything goes into it, but just bear in mind that we are doing that recording. Towards the end of the call today, we'll point you towards the Google Doc where we'll be noting a lot of content. What we'll be doing is taking the highlights from the chat and putting that into the Google Doc at the end. Okay, I'm just going to pass you across to Ross now to get you going. Is everybody hearing us all right? Great.
Oh, there's a couple of attendees with hands up.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Beth and Alistair. Oh, it's exciting. Yeah.
Beth, you want to chip in?
Beth is lost in the ether somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, there's Beth. Hi, Beth.
I was raising my hand to say that I could see you. So
cool.
that was like that was kind of a response. We can only see the 4 of you SCVO.
Yeah. So I think because we're in webinar mode, most of the audience have cameras off for now. But that may be an option you can switch on from your end. But what we'll do is we'll carry on. I'm just going to get our other panelists ready as well, so that they can kick off in a wee minute when Ross has introduced them.
Go for it. Do you want to bring them in, John?
Yeah, I'll do that now.
Yeah, it was exciting.
Hang on.
So we're looking for Sarah and Simon in the list.
I've clicked this wrong place. Sorry, we've got a very long list to work through. I'm just scrolling down all the
just in John's defence here, there's like 80 names to scroll through, and Zoom doesn't make it particularly easy to pick people out.
Okay, there's Sarah, and also I think every time somebody joins, the list jumps.
It jumps, yeah.
So
usually if you're on these calls, you'll notice that, hi Sarah, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. It's like a content cave that you live in there. Look at that.
Yeah.
That's superb. I love it.
Special cave.
Nice.
Okay, we've got Simon now as well.
Hi Simon. Have you got an option to put video on at your end? Oh, there we go. Ooh.
Hiya.
Hi Simon.
Hi.
I usually get told off because I'm formally dressed, and just like simply wearing a shirt makes you formally dressed at SCVO, it would seem. So I'm glad to see someone else has made an effort. That's good. Excellent. So so we usually use Zoom meeting functionality. So we're using webinars the first time today. So this is quite a new experience for all of us. So today's webinar is focused on content design and strategy. So I'm really pleased that the 2 speakers that we've got along today. So we've got Sarah Richards from Content Design London. I'm going to get 2 speakers to tell us a wee bit about them as well. And we've got Simon Kaplan from Citizens Advice. For anyone who works in the charity sector will know Citizens Advice have been doing amazing stuff with content over the last few years, and just some simple techniques that have helped them really get to the bottom of user needs and to better understand them, to better shape their content based around that. Is there any housekeeping stuff, John, that you want to chat about before we get started?
I think just to note, a couple of people have asked about, can we see the whole audience? I think that's not something we can enable while the meeting's happening, but we'll look at it for next time because we're aware on the other calls that was something that people find beneficial. But I think when people come in with a longer question, we'll make you a panelist so that we can see who's chatting. So don't worry if you've got a good question and you're missing out on a chance to be seen.
Yeah. We'll have a play about with that. So once the speakers have finished, we'll see if there's a way of bringing you all in, but we'll have a play about with that as we go. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah Richards. First of all, Sarah, do you want to tell us a wee bit about you and a bit about Content Design London? I usually have your book as a prop, but I gave it to a charity chief exec. Maddie will know this, and that charity chief exec has not given me your book back, and I'm quite sad about that.
We'll send you another one. It's fine.
Thank you. That's good.
So, hello, Sarah Richards. I run a company called Content Design London. I was the first head of content design for the government digital team, digital service. Simon was there at the time. And we created a discipline that I then wrote a book about.
That is like classic content design, where that was the shortest, sweet, and most precise. Like, you should all go and buy the book. So the book is available on Content Design London website. What's the URL for your site again?
It's contentdesign.london.
Excellent. Even that's succinct. But the book is really good. I've particularly found working with charities, the book's really useful because it demystifies content design and content strategy, and it gives you really simple actions to get back to what your users need. So for me, it's a really, really useful tool you should all be thinking about. There's some really good stuff actually on the Content Design London site. If you've not purchased the book, you can go and have a look at and explore it as well. So we'll start off with Sarah's session, and then we'll hear from Simon, and then we'll open it up and there'll be a chance for Q&A and discussion after that. So Sarah, do you want to fire away?
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to talk about some things that I'm seeing some charities do. And there are some ways that I think that you can improve, because this environment that we're in now is not going to go away. And what I'm seeing is an awful lot of panic publishing. Now, it's not just charities, by the way. Everybody's doing it, including government. Everybody's doing it. They're just shoving everything out. And I get why. But what you're actually doing, I think, is storing up problems for later on, because you're going to have to do something with all that at some point. So there are a couple of things that I just wanted to run through. We did a blog post on communicating clearly a little while ago. And my number one point was publish if you need to. Don't publish if you don't need to. It's the number one thing in content strategy and content design is, what are you publishing about? Why are you publishing? Now I think I would change that at this point to say, publish what your audience needs you to. There is a delicate balance between what your organization wants and what your users want. And sometimes what your users and your audience want, your organization can't give them. And sometimes they want the wrong thing. It's not that they know that, it's just like a perfect example that I use all around the world is actually from Citizens Advice. Where a guy came into a bureau, and what he wanted was for the advisor to take debt away from him, or a debt problem away from him. That's not the thing. You need to give them a whole bunch of steps so that they can get themselves out of debt and hopefully not get back in. So there is a level between want and need. And what I'm seeing at the moment is massive amount of panic publishing where that's just out the window. And there's so much noise, you actually can't engage. Even if you want to engage, you can't engage because you're not sure where to go or what to do. So number one thing is always like, what are you actually publishing for? Now, I also think right now is a really good time to take a step back and have a look at your content strategy, like an actual content strategy. And a content strategy is not a comms plan or an editorial calendar. That's not it. Content strategy should have your workflow and governance, who is doing what, when, what success and value is, everything. It should not just be, this is what we're doing in the next 3 months. Now is a really good time to get hold of that, because in 3 months' time, when everything has changed again, you won't have this kind of starting on the back foot, which I'm seeing a lot of organisations do now. So can I share my screen? Can I just... 1 second.
Good work, yeah.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, can you see that? Publish if you need
perfect.
to turns into your need. I just wanted to talk about this. This is a kind of quad that we use, or it's a group that we use for user journey mapping. So everything that we do is this is my second book. I'm journey mapping my book. Do you know what I mean? This is somebody else's. If you have a journey map and you understand what channels people are on and what they're talking about at any one time, you can actually run a whole organization off of one bank of user needs. It means that the content that you produce, you're not duplicating it, which is a waste of your time and your effort, to be brutally honest. You're not arguing about it as much. I'd like to say that you never argue about it at all, but it's never going to happen. You're probably always going to find somebody in your organization who wants to argue with you, but it should be a lot less. But you also get really consistent messaging across channels, and I'm seeing charities drop a bomb at various points. So I'll just take you through this and then I'll tell you why. So the user need is always the first one. What is their perception of you? What are they going to get from you? What can you actually give them? That's the organizational goal. So balance both of them. Your content strategy should tell you how to do that. Then it's the language that they use, because if you're not using it, they're not going to find you. Then it's the channel. Right? Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to have a brand new idea I've never thought about before. There's loads that goes on in your subconscious before you can make a conscious decision about anything. You need to tap into that, particularly now. So with very emotional times, or when there is a lot going on in someone's life, what we find is that reading and comprehension is like a scale. Right? So you get people here who read every single word, and you get people here who read nothing, they just skim. Now, in a normal environment, you'll find that most of your people sit in the middle, right? And they're along the scale somewhere, but they're in the middle. What we normally find in these kinds of situations, I haven't done comprehension testing in the past few weeks, so bear with me, but in this kind of environment, behavior starts moving outwards. And you are likely to see that middle bit exacerbated. And so you will get more people reading every single word and more people skimming. So there's this myth going around that if you're stressed, you don't read a thing. Not my experience. My experience is that it moves. So in this, you need to really start shortening your sentences. You should be on 19 to 21 words max. You should be having active, you should have lots of subheadings, you should have clearer call to actions. Yeah, and a clear hierarchy and a story of how you're going to go down that page. So that's your channels and your messaging, because what happens is you go from one channel to another channel because it's subconscious. And then when you get to the website, you're putting a lot of pressure on one page probably. And then you will track it and you'll have all the metrics off of it, but it may not actually be telling you the right story because you haven't thought about your content strategy as a whole. You haven't thought about all the content design throughout your journeys. Then you've got your main messages, make them consistent. They don't have to be as sledgehammery as the government are doing at the moment, but they're doing it for a reason, right? So there are a couple of books by the Nudge Unit. So if you just look up Nudge Unit and Richard Thaler, they're great for understanding that sort of thing. There's also a lot of open courses on neuroeconomics. It's how people make decisions if you're into that sort of thing. University of Warwick did a very good one a couple of years ago, if you want to look at that. It's a short introduction to how we make decisions, and that will help you really understand what's going on those journeys. Then you need to track what's going on with your content. You iterate it and delete it. Delete it. Everything should have some sort of archive date or some sort of deletion date. Again, what I'm seeing is a lot of people are putting up new information, but they're not taking down old information. And so you're getting a clash. And the stuff I'm looking for, I'm not getting because I'm stuck in your old content. So you need to actually, I would say to you, have you got a content strategy for COVID? Have you got a content strategy for unusual times? Because you now probably have more than enough experience and some data to do that. So number 2 then is about success and value. Success and value we track as 2 different things. Success can be, I don't know, you get 1,000 likes on Twitter or whatever in 30 minutes. But value is that people want to come and work for your company. So taking a concrete example, do you remember the ice bucket challenge? I'm looking at all the people. Yeah, you remember the ice bucket challenge, right? That grossed $115 million in the first couple of months it was running. Most people could not tell you what condition it was for or what charity it was for. So that is a prime example of it being valuable. $115 million is not to be sniffed at for a charity. That's amazing, I think. But if the purpose of that was to earn money, it's also successful. If the purpose of that was to get the condition into the ether and to get regular donations for that charity, it is a massive failure. Most people can't even tell you what charity it was. It was ALS in America. So you need to, every bit of content that we have, we do it by formats. You know, in your CMS, you have formats, templates. We normally run success and value criteria per format, so that you know how much people should be engaging, what they should be doing on the page, how much time, where they're going, all of these sorts of things. You set that per organization, that's going to be different. But success and value may not be the same things. Watch both of them, particularly now. And again, that should be in your content strategy. So number 3 is also emails. People are sending out emails like this, right? Emails are digital. The usual content design rules apply. You are still looking on it you're still looking at it on a screen. All the kind of tiredness and all that sort of thing that you apply to your content design skills on a website are exactly the same for emails. You'll also find click-through rates. So MailChimp put the industry standards out. For my industry, bearing in mind that we are a niche organization for a very small part of the industry, it's under 26%. Our open rate is always between 50 and 86%, because we don't publish very often. It's a clear benefit in the subject, and we know our audience. We know what they want and how to give it to them, because we've done a lot of analysis from it. What I'm also seeing is charities that I personally am very engaged with, sending me like this, and I'm deleting them. And I'm at a point where I'm like, I want to help other people, I want to give, but I cannot read all this, because we're all getting them, right? We're getting hundreds of emails from the CEO of whatever, telling us whatever. Again, this is where you are starting to create content debt. The more you give people now, and the more you shove out without a clear benefit in the first 15, 20 words, you're going to have to claw that person back later on. So I would say for some organizations that are just pumping this stuff out, watch your rates, watch your open rates, but realize that it is a digital asset. All the same rules still apply, including success and value. And the last thing that I want to say is, like, look after you. I know that it's big, and it's big in the charity sector, and it's great that most of you are saying wonderful and lovely things. At least that's what I'm seeing. But, you know, you're not working at home, you're working in a pandemic. You're probably not responsible for the panic publishing that is going on. Do what you can, let the rest of it go. That's all I've got for you. Everybody's still on mute. Can I unmute?
It's
if
okay.
I do that. Hey.
I had to wait for John to unmute me, so I was like talking into the ether there. He's got that control over me now. It's just terrifying. That was amazing, Sarah. Thank you so much for that. Really, really useful. I think really practical things that charities of all sizes in this room can go away and do. Particularly email. I think it's like emails often a dumping ground for stuff. It's just like, we'll just throw 100 emails at them. Some of them are bound to stick. They should be this long because there's loads of information and we're really important and we need to shout it all at them. So I think there's some questions coming through, but we're going to wait to hear from Simon, and then we'll get a kind of Q&A with both of you. But I've certainly got some questions out of that. That was really useful. In terms of the slides, are they available on your site? Are we allowed to share them with people, or what would work best for you? We've got a recording of the video as well, so.
You can share them, I can send them to you. That's
cool. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Right, Simon, do you want to tell us a wee bit about who you are and a bit about content design at Citizens Advice?
Yeah, sure. Lovely to be with everybody, and really nice to follow Sarah. Sarah's completely right. She founded Content Design. I was part of that team at the Government Digital Service. And to be honest, all the work I do every day is based on what I learned from fellow content designers and from Sarah, and about user needs and making sure that what we do every day is based on what people want to find out from us. I'm the content lead at Citizens Advice. I also co-lead the coronavirus content project, which involves content designers, subject matter experts, user researchers, and a data scientist. I just want to talk about three things today. What Citizens Advice does and how that's changed over the last couple of months, how we've met the coronavirus content needs of the millions of people who've come to us, and most importantly, the lessons we've learned. So I'll just talk through those things. If I'm not looking at you and looking to the side, I'm just referring to my notes, so hopefully that's not too disconcerting. So Citizens Advice provides advice to people so that they can find a way forward in the problems that they face. I think the unique selling point for Citizens Advice, there are loads of charities on this call who have really superb specialist and generalist advice. I suppose our selling point is we've been giving general advice on many, many areas for 80 years. And I suppose the way I would describe it, and I'll explain what I mean by it, is that it's tactical advice. We don't just talk about people's rights and responsibilities, but for example, we will give advice on what DWP are looking for if you're filling in a personal independent payments application form, what the question is, but what they're actually looking for. And it's that tactical advice we've got a lot of experience in. We've got 280 Citizens Advice offices around the country. We give advice in 2,500 locations. Last year, we helped 2.6 million people face-to-face through phone, chat, and email as well. And we had 25 million visits to our website last year. And I think that just provides a huge amount of data and evidence. And it's to that we turn to through our user researchers, data science. We talk to our advisors and the people who come to us for help in order to find out what's the user needs that Sarah spoke about, what's the want and what's the need, and how is the best way of answering that. We write and design content for two audiences, so the public and advisors. And although both audiences kind of come together to get and give advice, they have completely different mental models and completely different needs as well. We don't generally do what we call as push content. So we only provide content that people are looking for. And we haven't in the past generally given long advance warning when it's current. And that was how things were. And then in the middle of March, all our worlds turned upside down. So what did we do under that situation? And the points I make are a bit of a, I suppose, a case study to measure up against some of the points Sarah mentioned and the guidance she gave. And it'd be useful for people to think how successful we have been and what areas we could look at improving things. At the end of February, we sent an email to senior stakeholders in the organisation saying we needed to start doing work because this was going to become a pandemic and we needed a response. We started small. So we started with a content designer, some subject matter expertise, and we produced, it wasn't a team, we produced one new page and we wanted to monitor what the response was in terms of feedback, visits, search terms, and there was a massive response, much bigger than we expected. So we quickly recognized that the situation was extremely fast moving, and we moved to respond to that and discuss what resource we needed. We work using agile methods, so it was relatively easy to kind of adjust, move people from different projects, realize that we would have to pause on some things and move ahead with others. Just echoing the point that Sarah mentioned, we didn't throw every single bit of resource we had at the issue. We gradually built out and learnt from what we were doing so that there wasn't, if you like, panic publishing. We aligned ourselves with other teams and kept users front and center in terms of what we do. And we now have a team of around about 23 people working on the coronavirus advice content. In terms of content strategy, and referring to what Sarah said earlier on, I think we don't have a fully worked out, written down content strategy which itemizes all the things that Sarah mentioned in a succinct way, but we have, through the process, developed a content strategy. And the core of it is about developing new pages of content when there is a set of clear defined user needs that determines that. So we have a page, coronavirus, what it means for you. And we also have another page, being furloughed if you can't work, because there are sets of new user needs that need to be answered. And we, as well as those pages, we have an onward user journey to existing content that goes into more detail in terms of advice and what people can do under specific circumstances, which is content that's always existed on our site. And we also, as well as that, produce boxes of new content on existing content where there's not a need for a new page. So what we've done is we've produced about 60 new pages, and we have 180 boxes of extra coronavirus content across other pages on the site. Just in the final part of the comments I'd like to make, I'd like to talk about the lessons we've learned. I think the resources you have are really, really important. I mentioned that we work with subject matter experts, and these are experts who are legal experts, but also who have expertise in years of giving advice, and without them we wouldn't be able to content design the work we've done. It's very much of a collaborative effort, and during this crisis where there's been so much pressure, it's been absolutely vital for that collaboration to work and to succeed. I think any crisis that you work in requires different methods of working. You have to look at what you do to meet the need as quickly as possible. We had good experience during Brexit. Now, I'm not saying that was a crisis, but that was definitely a pressurized situation, and we learned a lot from that. The main lesson, I would say, be flexible. Don't spend ages mapping processes and writing process documents, because the day they're out, you'll have to redo them. Things change every day, and you need to be flexible to go with the flow. We have a good record of really testing our content before we publish, and testing it with users, making sure we're meeting the user needs. We haven't had time to do that testing over the past 8 weeks because the stuff wouldn't have gone live. We've obviously used what we've learned in previous situations on previous subjects to apply that to the content design and development of new advice content. But we've also, as well as not having as much time to test, we've also had to speed up our content creation processes. And, you know, from our point of view, our live content has become our test. And what I mean by that is every day we look at the feedback, we look at the stats, and we see how people are reacting to what we've developed, and then we change it if necessary, we update it. So the main coronavirus page in the last 6 weeks, we've updated that 120 times. So we've iterated it 120 times. I think it's also important, the lesson we've learned is that the needs people have are not just about the legal changes, and there are many, many legal and statutory changes which we've had to take into account. It's around changing in people's circumstances. So, for example, people who are self-isolating and need to top up their prepayment meter. There's no legislative change around that, but that's definitely a change in their circumstance that we've got to provide advice on what they could do in that situation. I said before, we don't do push content. But what we've discovered in this process is sometimes, and it's partially related to kind of the stress that people are under, there are bits of information and advice that people need to know, which they may not be looking for, but they really need to know it, or they will face bigger detriment or a bigger problem later on. So under certain situations, we've provided that information. I think also reassurance content is important. So in advance of government actually implementing new regulations, there's a lot of uncertainty. Maybe people feel there's a lack of clarity, and we provide reassurance by saying, well, actually the guidance isn't clear. So we call it out, we say that, and we say we will update this content when it does become clearer, and that's what we actually do. The last 2 points I'll make, just first of all, on advisors, they've, in effect, they've had a huge change in their working conditions. So, they're now all working remotely. They're working on channels that they wouldn't have worked on before. So they're doing telephone, web chat, and email advice, where generally many of them would have done face-to-face. So that is a truly massive change. They're working at home, so they don't have access to reference books. They don't have immediate access to an advisor sitting next to them, or the advice session supervisor who may have decades of experience who can give them advice. All of that just means a huge change. I'm sure many of you have seen the same issues in your own charities, and therefore we've had to develop advice for them on how they deal and cope with that situation. The other thing which Sarah mentioned, team health. I spend a lot of my time discussing individually with team members, groups of team members, keeping the communication going, and understanding what people's needs are. I'll just conclude by saying, I think Sarah mentioned kind of this is almost the new normal. I know that's awful jargon, but what we've got to begin to think about is what will the situation like, is it going to be just a return to how things were before? And I'm not sure it is going to be like that. So we need to start thinking about what are the long-term changes in user behavior. Will there be groups, audiences that come towards us that haven't claimed benefit before? Will they have a greater ability to use online content and self-serve? All those kind of things we need to think about. So that's just a brief summary of what we've done. Happy to answer any questions and listen to your experiences as well.
That's brilliant, Simon. Thank you. Some really useful stuff in there. There's some great questions been coming in via the chat. I'm going to, Tom Yule looks like he's fallen asleep, so I'm going to call on him first of all. There you go. You've woken up, Tom. Excellent. Do you want to unmute yourself, Tom? You can tell everyone where you're from.
Do you want me to unmute myself first?
Yeah, please. So you had a question for Sarah about stakeholder management.
It was just a basic question, Sarah, about how would you go about an organisation where there's lots of noise going on, lots of great ideas, lots of bad ideas. How do you start to manage the stakeholder management?
That's a good question.
Right, this is the, I don't know, this is the holy grail, right? It does depend on the organisation. It also depends on their maturity model and where they are in content. Are we talking a little bit further back? Is that what we're talking about?
I don't want to say it.
Okay, let's do a wide range and we can save everybody's blushes then. If you have a mature organisation, it's great. You walk up and you say, this is the data and this is failure. As Simon was saying, also don't let perfect be the enemy of good right now. You know, there are things that I sit there and I've got my head in my hands. It's like, do not overuse punctuation. It drives me bananas. But do you know what? Get it up. Just get it up and get it out if it's useful, without panic publishing. If you are at a point where you can then track and iterate and show the data and say, this is what's failing, this is what's working, we need to move, that's one end of the scale, and that's great. Always have those conversations. My experience is that a lot of organizations have gone into this without having that grounding level. And the fact is, you've just got to start back, or you've got to start in kind of twin track. So one is gathering that data and evidence. There's no point in having an argument about my opinion is, your opinion is, because whoever's higher up the tree and gets paid more is going to get their way, right? Whether they agree with you or not. That's my experience. So you need to have like a twin track approach. So one is get all that data in, get all the evidence in, but the other one is find out what they care about. Is it being on the front page of some tabloid being blasted? Is it a competitor that they appear to be doing better than them? So the story that I tell a lot is that I once knew content designers in 3 different supermarkets in this country. They were all copying each other to the tune of millions, and they were all failing because they were copying each other. And it wasn't working for anybody, but they were all going with it because everybody else was doing it. So you can have a look at what other people are doing and use that in those conversations as well, but don't blindly follow them because it may be going horribly wrong for them. You need to like understand what they've got, understand what you've got, and then find the happy medium. But also have a look at where are you in that content maturity model. Where are you and where do you want to be? And it may be now is the time to start it. It doesn't seem like it because like everybody's running around and it's all panic, but actually there are going to be moments where you may get somebody to listen and say, look, this isn't going away. We either start this now and we get something in place in 3 months, or we're still running around like this in 3 months. Some of the things that I will do with a team is ask them what are they not doing because they're doing all the things that they're doing now. And a lot of it, particularly around news and press releases, is like, oh, we're doing all this and we're pumping out all this information, but there's not enough return, the success and value criteria I was talking about. There's not enough of that. And actually, I just need time to pick up the phone and talk to some journalists and get that sort of thing sorted out. So that's, again, success and value for the team. And often organisations will get on the back of that and go, look, we're not doing this and we should be. This is what is really good for us and we're not getting to any of it because we're fighting with you lot about that. So it's just finding what they care about and then using it. Is that remote? Does that answer the question?
I help you, Tom?
Yeah, it does help. And it's difficult conversations you need to have with people where you're saying we've been doing this stuff for a while, we've been doing following your book, doing content design. We know what we're talking about. It's just sometimes we need to have faith in each other that we're going down the same road path.
Yeah, and that is difficult if you don't have a content strategy written down or something that you can point to. You know, and a content strategy doesn't need to be massive. We've got an example one on the site if you wanted to have a look. We've just opened it up. It is a little bit old to be fair, but all the building blocks are still there. You can do like COVID, and it's one side of an A4. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going to get publishing. This is success and value, and this is why. It doesn't need to be massive.
It's funny, I started working on a strategy yesterday, so it's taking at least one step in the right direction.
Yeah, no, perfect.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Sarah. So your point there, Sarah, is actually, it's answered one of the questions from Steph Smith about content strategy templates. I was going to bring in Charlotte Kelly. Charlotte, are you still on the call? Are you about? Oh no. Maybe she's fallen asleep like Tom. Oh, is she about? Maybe she's not about. I'll answer the question. I'll ask the question for her. So she was asking questions about where to start with writing a content strategy specifically for a small charity. And Simon, I don't know if you've got any tips, even if it's like 2 or 3 pointers in terms of core building blocks of that content strategy, particularly where, I guess, in a smaller charity, that content responsibility is going to be 0.9 on a list of responsibilities for someone's job. And what does that look like, and how do you tackle that strategically?
I would say if you're in a smaller charity, in terms of the building blocks for a content strategy, kind of what's your audience, what are the main things they come to you for, and then out of that develop some, you know, your top 4 or 5 user needs. And is there a way you can measure meeting those needs? And that's kind of the basis of a content strategy. Just use your data, use the frontline advice givers as well, because they'll have a huge amount of evidence to give you back. We've discussed with other charities and worked with them who are specialists in areas, and they have formed panels of users because they don't have the same user research resources. They work with their advisors who are also subject matter experts, and they come up with, these are the fundamental areas we're going to cover.
That's really useful, thank you, Simon. Charlotte, does that answer your question? Charlotte unmuted herself. Are you there, Charlotte? Oh, I should never get a job in radio. This is harder than it looks. John had a really interesting question, actually. I'm going to scroll up. I don't know if you can remember it, John, or if I can. Oh, yeah, so John had asked, and it was for Sarah or Simon, about what are the biggest wrong assumptions that charities make about their users and how can we avoid those? So I don't know if either of you has got any thoughts on that one. So that was a question about what are the biggest wrong assumptions that charities make about their users.
Simon, you should answer that one.
I love that, nominating someone else. That's excellent.
You got in there first. I was going to drop you in it, Sarah. I think it can be. I think often the big problem is you. In a charity, if you've got lots of experience in a charity and people have got experience of giving advice, then there may be a danger of wanting to answer every single possible question. And the biggest wrong assumption is that users will want to know the answer to every single possible question and will stay on your website even if what they're presented with has got nothing to do with what the answer they're looking for. So that you know, that's it's kind of subjective views can influence what you think your users actually want, and that can happen in all parts of the organization.
Yeah. That classic thing which you tend to see in a lot of charities is all content is grouped by the way that services are grouped in that organization, rather than thinking, how does a human come across a problem that they have in their life and then ask questions around that problem and then finds your content online. It's that assumption that we already know what a certain type of service a charity delivers and the language that charity uses, and we funnel people down those avenues. Okay, there was a question which I thought was quite an interesting one, actually, which came in. Yeah, it was Beth's one, actually. Beth, I don't know if you want to jump in this. This is about signposting the content, linking out to sources rather than duplicating. So I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah. I mean, it was really just looking for guidance on, so if we know that we shouldn't be writing stuff that other people have written better than us and are experts in, but we know that people might trust our organisation and come to us initially looking for it, are there good tips on how you present and signpost people out to other stuff? The best ways of doing that, the best ways of structuring that?
Sarah, do you want to come in on that one? Now I'm doing it to you.
Yeah, so generally it's user journey work. Again, what are they coming to you for? Why do they trust you over the other person's Google results is what I would say. And why are your links being shared rather than someone else's? You're perfectly right. Don't duplicate, particularly now, because as everything changes so often you're going to have to change your content. So I would probably say add the value that you add as an organization, and then send a whole load of links off. But just be really mindful, like, do you even need to do that? Can you just get rid of them in search results by you not being there, and get them to their organization, to their information faster? There is a thing about, well, we haven't got traffic, so, and that's a key metric. We don't have traffic as a metric. It's not a thing for us, and for most of the organizations that we work with. So there is that, and there is a balance for that. But if your organization can really add value to that part of the journey, then I say do it and have the links underneath. But if you can't really consider, just don't have it, let Google do its thing.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah.
The only thing I'd add on top of that is when you link, it's useful to know the organization that you're linking out to, how current they keep their content, how they design their content as well. Is it designed on a user needs basis? Because even if another organization, it's unlikely, but even if they were higher up in Google results than yourself and you link to them, if you're sending you have a certain responsibility if you're sending users to another site. And if they've got dense, impenetrable content that, even though it's maybe correct and in the subject area people are looking for, I wouldn't send them there. I think also the link wording and what you link to, it's useful to know what you think the user journey is and link to a specific page rather than kind of a general landing page. So, you know, find out more about is kind of, my toenails start to curl when I read that on a site, because I know I've got reason, I need to have a reason to click on that link. Well, tell me what the reason is.
There's also something there about organizations are sending out these emails and really drawing people in. I mean, there's some lovely examples of kind of, this is what's happening now, you know, not unprecedented, not that, but like, this is what's happening, and this is the impact on us, and this is a little case study, and, you know, we'd like you to be engaged with us or donate with us or do something or whatever. And there's a lovely call to action. And then it goes to a homepage and you're just lost. You've lost me then. Yeah. Because you've got the warm and fuzzies from the email, and then it's like you don't care. So there's also that kind of cross-channel thing going on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, there's a couple of points coming in the chat that I just thought I'd pick up on actually. So there's one actually from Matt White in stakeholder management, just a really simple piece of advice, but I think kind of universally applicable. So he's saying on stakeholder management, try to find other allies to align with elsewhere in the organisation and get them inside safety in numbers. We work closely with policy, news and business development teams to align priorities, have the discussions, surface the disagreements, and then commit to the way forward, and you're not drawn into those internal politics and those kind of bun fights that come into play. One from Beck, so Rebecca Ray Evans has just kind of reiterated the fact that she loves that you don't measure traffic, and she's got a real issue about the fact of people being obsessed about bounce rates but having no idea why they're obsessed about bounce rates. I think it's a really good point. Either of you want to talk about that in terms of measurement, and do you still find that people are obsessed with kind of meaningless metrics like that, and how do you kind of counteract that in the organisation and educate people as to what are the important metrics for them? Also, Bex, feel free to jump in if I've just made utter gibberish out of your very succinct sentence there. No, you're shaking your head, you're too polite. Okay. Simon, anything about measurement?
I think generally with senior people in the organisation, then I think there's an understanding that we, you know, just a blanket measure of unique page views can be unhelpful. I think maybe some of our trustees understand that as well. So it's also about user satisfaction. So we have yes/no feedback on the bottom of every page. We also explain how on certain pages, how long somebody's on the page is also useful and important. But I think it's around user satisfaction, feedback, levels of feedback on whether the information or the advice has worked, which is really important. You know, over time, it's explaining that patiently and showing examples, if you like, case studies of how we've used information like that to improve content.
Yeah, I think like if you have traffic with another metric, even that is more useful than having traffic on its own. If you have 50,000 people go to your page and not one person engages with you, that's 50,000 useless views. You might as well have 5 that engage with you and become your champions, or donate, or just share on social media, whatever it is that you actually want that content to do. You are much better off having a smaller audience that do success and value than having stacks and stacks that just don't. It's all about measuring the intention of the content. What did you want it to do and for whom? Once you've got that, that is what becomes useful. That's what becomes valuable.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent.
And just to give another concrete example, we for our consumer service, we've got you know, important stakeholders with whom we work in that area. And I was in a session, a workshop with them, and they were talking about very high visits to a particular page. And what we'd done in the run up to the meeting was put mouse flow on the page, like heat mapping. And we showed using that people were landing on the page in their tens of thousands and then bouncing straight out. They were not reading the page. And we used feedback with that to show that the way the page was titled, users were expecting something completely different to what they achieved. So even though it got very high visits, it didn't serve a useful purpose.
That's a really good example. Yeah, in terms of those tools, it would be interesting to hear from the panelists if there's any tools that you recommend. One that we've used quite a lot, so we recently built the Charity Digital Code website. We've used tools like Hotjar. So Hotjar is a really simple heat mapping tool, but you can do some of that instant feedback stuff. Hotjar is available for free to non-profits, so it's quite, I mean, the premium versions is really expensive. It's about $300 a month, I think, but you can get the premium one for free as a registered non-profit. I hassled them a couple of years ago, so if you go on, it asks for like an American 501c. But if you're a Scottish charity, you can screenshot your page on the Oscar website and you can upload that instead of a 501c, and they'll accept it, and they'll do the same with the Charity Commission for charities in England and Wales as well. Any tools, Simon or Sarah, that you can recommend that might be useful for people?
For us, we use MouseFlow quite a bit, and then for the content designers, we use things like SEMrush and Google Trends. So, you know, to discuss with stakeholders in the organisation if they want to call, you know, use a particular phrase, and you think there's a phrase, a plain English phrase that users will understand better. Put them both into Google Trends, compare them. It's kind of, you know, it's a million times better than me speaking till I'm blue in the face. It's just like, there it is. Yeah.
And I love that, the fact that the data is going to get you the answer and the decision, rather than you and I will have a fight in a meeting for 4 hours about who's right. Is actually, what is the data telling us about how people are finding this stuff online? What's the language they're asking? What are the questions they're using? And particularly, actually, there was an organisation who will remain nameless in this room, who were quite a significant mental health body, and who took the decision not to use the word sectioned anywhere on their website. Now, despite the fact that if anyone's concerned about someone's mental health and they have been sectioned, even though it's not legally called that in Scotland, that's the first thing they'll search for. All the analytics shows that's the first thing they search for. The very body that was meant to be there to help them didn't appear in the top 5 results in Google because they didn't use the term anywhere on their website. And so where are people getting information? And that potential people to get information from out of date or even potentially dangerous sources are actually sources that aren't legally applicable in Scotland because someone has outperformed that search result because you happen to use the term and they didn't use it. So I think it's a really good point from Simon.
I think there's another example of where it kind of works from the other direction. So one of the things we've noticed is a rise in people searching for terms around bankruptcy. So they search for bankruptcy, they'll get directed to a certain page on the site, but we've got fairly good evidence from our advisors that what they need to search for is debt relief orders. So how we handle that transition is really, really important, because it will save people loads of time and money and save our advisors time as well, which is really important. So we haven't got a solution to that yet. We're working on it.
Yeah. What I'm going to ask now is if anyone wants to jump in and ask a question. So you just stick your finger up and we can pick someone if they've got a question for Sarah or Simon, or even if you want to share any of your own experiences about content strategy or content planning or tools that you like to use. Anyone want to jump in? This is this awkward moment where I scroll through all the screens and then see nobody has a finger up at all. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the chat then if nobody's got a question they want to jump in with. Alison Clancy from Danny's going to jump in, and then we'll grab Alison's question from chat. Danny, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, this is slightly off tax a wee bit, but we're seeing an influx of organisations. So I work for Bold, social enterprise design agency, and we're seeing an influx of people wanting to commercialise content that maybe might have been a byproduct of their whatever service they offer. So they just had it publicly available. So whether it be recipes or art tutorials or e-learning content or something like that, now they're trying to make money out of that, whereas they would usually do it through workshops and face-to-face. Is there any tips on how to migrate from publicly available to commercialized content?
Carefully.
Yeah.
You're going to lose a lot of people. Once they decide that something is free, then it's good, right? And when you suddenly start to charge for it, then it's going to be very difficult. But what I would say is tell people why. You know, we did a thing recently when we were going to start up a content club, but I was kind of like, well, we're not huge agency and it needs to pay for itself, because I want to pay people, community managers and stuff in there. I'm not going to ask for volunteers, particularly now. They either get paid or we're not doing it. And at first when we said it, everybody said, I want everything for free. And when we were like, no, it needs to sustain itself. And we explained why, suddenly we had a lot more engagement going, oh, no, I will take that because I understand why. So if you are going from one model to the other, one, it's got to work and it's got to be seamless. I mean, absolutely seamless. People are, even with government, if the interaction has any kind of friction, people do not have time for it. And it's not about being intelligent, by the way. It's not anything like that. It's just time and like emotional capacity to give to anything. So the actual experience itself has to be utterly, utterly seamless. And the other thing, be upfront. Just be honest about why you're charging for it. Because I think most people would understand, actually.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah. I think as well, a lot of charities get a bit of a shock when they're like, you know, someone on the board has a really good idea. We're going to make all this money because we're going to charge for content. The content is questionable as to whether you could charge it in the first place, and then you stick a paywall on it, and then actually the audience suddenly becomes zero for your content and 3 people have bought it in the last 12 months. Is actually maybe the worth, as Sarah described, is in the content being your site itself, and then the knock-on effect is through fundraising or someone signing up for an event or volunteering. So I guess it's that question of the worth of the content, and always trying to ask that. I see this a lot with charities where they don't necessarily ask people to pay it, but they stick it behind a registration. So essentially, you know, a charity-based paywall, and then nobody registers, because getting someone to register for a site these days is so difficult. And then what happens is the potential huge audience for your content becomes tiny because someone's been obsessed about getting registered signups on a website. So yeah, I think it's just that value question again. Right, Alison Clancy from Parent Across Scotland. Hi Alison, you had a question.
Hi, yes, Simon, it was really for you. You'd spoken about including a link for another organisation's information on your website, which we do a lot, actually. We link out to lots of different organisations, but really quite small ones quite often. And sometimes we do audits all the time on the organisations, the links that we're you know, sending people to. But sometimes, you know, their content or the way their website is organized isn't particularly great. You know, it's not, you know, particularly, not that the information isn't up to date, but the website, it looks old and it's sort of clunky. But actually the content is really good, and it's, you know, and it's very niche questions that people would be asking. So if we didn't link to those kind of sites, how would users then find that content? Because they don't really come up in Google. So they're not, you know, they haven't done any SEO or anything, you know.
I think if you're in an organization which doesn't have the subject matter expertise for specialist areas, or you just don't have the resources, then I think you've got to deal with the reality that you've outlined, Alison, which is, well, we will need to link out to these specialist organizations. When you say, well, the content's quite good, what all I would say is, you know, is to maybe check that, if you can, in different ways with some of your users, so that your view, your gut feeling is confirmed by your users. And even if it doesn't look like the most, I suppose, modern, cleanest design, I think given the reality of what you've described, as long as obviously the information is correct and you said that, and your users can understand and will engage with it, then I would link to them. You've got a problem if your user, you know, if you look at users navigating to that website and if they all bounce away, then really pointless including the link, because it may be there, but nobody's going to do anything with it.
No. Okay, no, that's really helpful, actually. It's just that some of the websites that we link to are really niche.
Yeah.
And, you know, but there's really nothing else out there for parents for that kind of advice or something that they need. But yeah, we do sort of like, I was going to say quality control. It's not, you know, it's, you know, we make sure it's not for profit. There's no advertising. You know, we have criteria to actually include the links.
Yeah, I would just do a bit of a focus group, get some of the people, even if it's 4 or 5, and just see what they'll do. Where, you know, people who would use it.
That's great. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, so just on Simon's point there, I've just put a link in. So Steve Krug, so if anyone's read his books, just some really simple user testing stuff that you can do on your site if you've got no experience of this, where you don't need any technical equipment whatsoever. His books are fairly cheap, available online, but there's also, he's made the script open source, so I've just put a link for that in the chat, and that's basically just a really simple walkthrough script that you can do for user testing in-house. And I know lots of charities that have used that really successfully, so that's worth going and have a look at. Right, John had a question about evergreen content versus new content. Do you want to jump in, John?
Yeah, sure. I guess it's a little bit like what you were talking about, users having one term, but your internal team thinking in terms of other language. But really, I guess quite a common scenario for a lot of charities is they've actually got quite a rich store of content, and quite often they're sitting on pages which still get a lot of traffic. The charity staff focus might be on the newest content or the stuff that they're wanting to push right now. So it's really about, you know, how do you encourage stakeholders to remember that pages with lots of traffic still need to be kept up to date and used because they're still meaningful for users.
Who wants to jump in on that one?
I think
Sarah?
that is also down to your kind of your journey mapping and your success and value, because there are, like, as we've been talking about in various different aspects here, there are people generally don't interact with the site, where they go in, read a thing and then leave, and then they have nothing. You know, maybe BBC or like a news site, BuzzFeed, whatever, you might go in and do that kind of behavior. But this is not a group where that happens or where that should be happening. So you need to understand what those kind of longer term goals are. Also, we need to remember that the voice searches that, like particularly Google Home, is picking up, like 96% of them have never been heard of before. So it's not that the information that's sitting there evergreen isn't useful, it's just where is it and where should it be? And if they are the highest traffic, then you do need to maintain them. But the question would also be, why are you not maintaining them? Well, why do they feel that the new stuff has always got to be there? It may be because it's kind of publishing is success. That's what I do. But again, if you had success and value written down, that it would not be a question, it would not be a conversation, because publishing is not success.
Yeah, really good advice there. Yeah.
I think just to add on that, I think some organisations, you know, it's almost as if they've published a microsite for coronavirus within their own site. And it's really easy to do that. And it's kind of related to John's point, because it's the current thing. And not only is it the current thing that stakeholders think are important, millions of people in the country think it's important. But for example, so last week, our coronavirus, what it means for you page dropped out of the top 10. It's of our most visited pages. There are other coronavirus content pages that are way up in there, but there are pages on redundancy that are evergreen content, you know, content that's been around for a long time, that are in there. And I think for us, we're not trying to duplicate content on coronavirus that already exists on our site. And I'm sure there are examples. There are probably examples on our site where that not on coronavirus, but on other issues where you have new content which maybe duplicates older content. And what I would do is just show what happens on internal search when you the confusion that's caused, and where the answer to the user's question actually is, possibly positions 7, 8, 9 on your internal search, and the evergreen content, while it may have all the right keywords, doesn't have the information, and that's in position 1 or 2. So it's, again, it comes down to, this is the effect. Let's take people's opinions out of the situation. Let's have a look at what's the actual result.
Simon, Hannah did a really good piece, didn't she, on Medium, about you deleting one of your pages that had 70,000 views a month.
Yeah.
Is that still up?
It probably is. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you search for Hannah Horton on Medium, when she was working for Citizens Advice, she did a blog post on these sorts of topics that might be useful.
And it was problems at work. And we ended up deleting the page and replacing it with other content, because it was making people really, really frustrated.
Yeah, that's really useful, actually. I shared a link previously to the Citizen Advice Medium blog, which is, there's some really good stuff in there. One of the ones actually I quite liked, Simon, was just that simple thing of the changes that you made to the Contact Us page.
Yeah.
I thought, for me, it's a thing that I've been kind of harping on to charities for years, is the amount of hoops I need to jump through to even contact you. And when I finally get to that place, I have no idea who this is going to or what's going to happen with it once I finally hit send. And for me, I think for a lot of the actions that we want people to take on the site is what does that content functionality look like? And that's, so the content functionality for someone who wants to apply to be a volunteer is very different from someone who wants to sign up for a 10K, is very different from someone who needs to speak to a benefits advisor. But somehow we've lumped all that into this standardized contact form, and actually often nobody ever gets pushed to them. We expect the user to make that leap from reading the content to then go, I want to run a 10K, I better click contact us, and then I'll get the blank form, and then I'll fill a thing in that I don't know if it will go to the fundraising team or if it will go to a generic admin email address. So have you got any advice, Simon, just in terms of some of the changes you made and simple things that charities can do so that that contact us functionality actually fits in more with that user experience?
I think one of the things particularly on the Contact Us page, because that's often one of the most frequently visited pages, I think for us, it's about making sure the Contact Us page doesn't reflect the organizational structure of your charity, but it reflects the needs of your users. And the Contact Us page becomes an issue. It's a bit like the homepage. It becomes the issue of hot debate. So I'll give an example. We had our consumer service said to us, we're getting lots of calls in from members of the public and they should be going to the general telephone number. And we just think we need to emphasize, you know, that if you phone this number, this is what will happen. So we said, fine, we'll look into it. And we did some thinking about it and imagining and using real user journeys. And we found the reason for the problem that I've just described is that Google had indexed our consumer service number as the Contact Us number. And that accounted for all that failed demand. And it took us about 3 or 4 months to convince Google to change their minds and to correct their mistake. And rather than adding a whole load of content to the Contact Us page, we went to the root of the problem and got that changed, and the failed demand disappeared overnight. So, yeah.
Okay, Sarah, any thoughts on that one? I know it's like the most dull question, but I do feel that so many experiences that I have on charity websites, this is the bit where it falls short.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's also just not understanding the audience. We did some stuff again when I was at Citizens Advice, you know, we did some stuff on people who are profoundly deaf and how when they went through government services it's completely different. So they had a perception of what was going to go on and then they would turn up to an office and it was completely different. We've worked with some people with autistic users, and again just showing them where they're going and what is going to happen is so kind of reassuring. And there seems to be this view that you can't do that anymore, particularly with content design, and I can tell you from my point that is a complete lie. If people don't trust you, they're not going to interact with your content in any way anyway. So I think it's perfectly fine to give that sort of information, so long as you're not waffling and so long as you're still serving a user need. Lovely, that's what I would say.
Absolutely, great advice. Okay, any other people want to come in with questions or any thoughts? Any hands up? Okey-doke. So I'm going to put you both in the spot. I'm going to do the thing that I hate being asked whenever I'm on a panel, but now I'm going to make someone else do it because I don't have to do it. Can I ask each of you if you've got just one piece of advice? So given that we've got charities of varying sizes in this room, if they could go away and do one simple thing tomorrow, what that simple thing could be. I'm conscious that list could be endless, but if there's one simple thing that someone could go away and do tomorrow, what could that be? For charities of any size. Sarah, do you want to go first?
I was hoping you'd say Simon. I think it would probably be, do you know what? You could take 4 hours, just 4 hours of doing some desk research on your users, on how they're behaving now. Get some language out, get just a few mental models and take a look at your content strategy. Does it serve that? And I think just 4 hours, and I know that seems like a lot, right? It's a morning, but that 4 hours could probably save you days worth of time over the next 3 months. So go and do a bit of desk research, go into some forums, go onto Google Trends, go do some language and some mental modeling and just understand where your audience is right now. And I think that will save you a lot of time later.
Brilliant advice. Great. Thank you, Sarah. Simon?
Something similar from me. I'm not copying, honest. So the context I've been working in and team members have been working in, those working on coronavirus and other work, is just unremitting demand for meeting new needs, providing answers to new problems for weeks and weeks and weeks now. So I would say tomorrow morning, maybe 4 hours, maybe 2 hours, take that time aside, either by yourself if you're a one-person team or with your team members. Look at what you've done so far and plot what the user journey might be through that content, and where there is some friction in the content in the user journey, where things don't make sense, and then draw some themes out of that and apply those as you make changes over the coming weeks.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm just going to quickly say thanks to our speakers, and I'm going to hand over to John, who's going to talk a wee bit about some of the broader stuff that's going on across SCVO. So thank you so much, Sarah. So Sarah's website, contentdesign.london, you'll get information on the book. The template that Sarah mentioned is on there. One of the things actually which I'm going to plug, because you've not plugged it, Sarah, is some of the stuff at the moment on style guides that you're doing, which I've found really useful, and I've signposted quite a lot of charities that way. So for those of you who are thinking about, yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
So we are doing a global project at the moment. So Jerry McGovern has done top tasks with the World Health Organization, and we're taking his priorities and creating a bank of user needs. So we can run a whole organization off of one bank of user needs, because it's got all the language acceptance criteria, sentiment scoring, the lot. So that won't work around the world, by the way, but that's how we do it. So what we're doing is asking organizations if you already have your user stories, if you've got them in job stories, user stories, however you've got them, if you can share them with us, plus the validation, we're going to put them in a great big spreadsheet and just open it up so that the world can get hold of it. The idea is that if you have that, then again, you can look at it and say, what's my organization got? What gaps have I got? Because if you have a look at Jerry McGovern's work with World Health, it's pretty comprehensive. And so you will have a better idea of a content strategy of what everybody wants, and then you can balance it with what your organization does. Because you can say, I do that, I do that, I do that. I need to make sure I've got this content. I don't need that because somebody else is doing it. So it should just make things easier. So if you can get in touch with us, it's just info@contentdesign.london if you've got some user needs to share. If you are an experienced user need writer and you want to get involved and just give us some of your time, we're all sitting here trying to create validated user needs as well. Also, just a quick one, we have a book bundle, which is a readability guidelines and my book. And if you've got a charity email address, you can mail Claire, and it's with an I, so CLAIRE, at contentdesign.london, and she'll give you a 20% discount.
Nice, superb. I was actually just going to, because we've got till past, there's something that I had in my own notes which I hadn't picked up on, and I just think it's a really simple thing that if you haven't read the book, to get your head around, and it's about job stories. For a lot of charities doing content design, they'll have heard of user stories, they'll understand some of that stuff, but just the difference between user stories and job stories. I was just quickly going to share screen just to show people what a job story looks like, and if you could just give people like a 2-minute overview of what a job story is, I think that'd be really useful, Sarah. Right, this is where it all falls short, because I always do share screen and then like everything collapses, but let's go for it anyway. Right, so hopefully you can all see my screen now. So Sarah, do you want to, I'm totally putting you on the spot here, I'm sorry, but do you want to tell everyone about job stories and the difference between a job story versus a user story?
Okay, so 2 types of stories. Use one, not both. If you use both, it gets really ugly really quickly. So my friend says, don't do it. User stories is when the user or the audience is more important than the actual task itself, or it will influence the content. So an example where I found out that it went horribly wrong was Red Cross, because they have trainers and then they have people who are just looking, and one of their highest traffic pages, this is years ago, was choking. Now there are 2 different ways of getting it. If you're a trainer, you need to understand whether you're choking or coughing or throttling, and then there's a whole load of different things that can happen in your throat with an obstruction. If you are a member of the public and you have a child in front of you, you've got about 4 seconds to start sorting yourself out if this child is actually choking. And so those are very different needs. So if your content will change or should change based on the person who's reading it, use user stories. Job stories is when the task is more important than the person doing it. So for example, a really good one is like Airbnb or hotels. It doesn't matter who's going traveling as the start of it. It matters that the thing has that the hotel is near where you are. It's in your price budget. You may then have that they have family options, but you can't say as a parent, because what if you're a grandparent or an aunt or a guardian, or you're a school about to take children away? So do you see what I mean? Now, sometimes you can use either or, and it won't matter for your content. Sometimes it is very, very different. So with user stories, it's as I want to, so that. And with job stories, it's when I want to, so that. And you always need to have that goal. So it depends on, again, it's the intention of your content. Is the person doing it going to change what they're doing and what their goal is?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah,
Exactly.
I did a roadshow with the new chief exec of Victim Sport Scotland a couple of years ago when she came into post, and we're talking, trying to get, they've got quite an older volunteering demographic, and actually when we talked to them about job stories, like the penny completely dropped. They understood what digital was about and where it fitted in and how digital channels could be useful to victims of crime, and they all managed to write job stories for the Victim Sport Scotland website, and it was just such a simple concept for them to get their head around. So those of you in the room who are maybe struggling with your teams or with volunteers, or when you're working with beneficiaries and workshops, for me, job stories are a really good way of getting people to get their head around it. Okay.
I prefer job stories now to user stories. I will try and use job stories first, and then I will skip and change an organisation to use it if I have to. Generally, job stories are much better because most of the time it doesn't matter who's doing it, they just need the information.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Simon, thank you so much for joining us. That was incredibly useful. The Citizens Advice blog, which we spoke about previously, so wearecitizensadvice.org.uk. The other thing that I would just encourage everyone to go and do is go and have a look at that Citizens Advice homepage and how they structure information. Particularly, I like the fact that it's really clear, here's the things that people are searching for right now, here are the priority items, and that's fluctuating week to week. And you can almost see those patterns in what society looks like via the searches that happen on that Citizens Advice website. It's pretty remarkable. Okay, John, I'll hand over to you. We've got about 9 minutes left, so I'm conscious there's lots of interesting stuff going on across SCVO just now. There's maybe some things that you want to share with people.
Thanks very much. I definitely wouldn't need 9 minutes. Just say thanks very much to Sarah and Simon for their insights and all the interesting questions as well. As you probably all know, the DigiShift calls that we do are like a community. So you're all doing your work, trying to make digital work for your charities. So as well as these calls, we offer other ways of supporting you. One service we're offering right now is a DigiHelp short call. So you can book a short call of 15 minutes to work through a particular obstacle you're facing. You can do that online. If you look at the @SCVO Twitter feed or my Twitter feed @JohnFitzG, you can see a link for that. The other thing we do after each call is publish blogs or short articles that are related to what we've been talking about this week. So that'll be on the SCVO website at scvo.org.uk/digital. And each call gets turned into a podcast, which we call DigiListen. And that usually comes out towards the end of the week. And it's usually about half an hour long. It contains the kind of highlights of the discussion. That's available on Spotify and all the usual channels. Next week,